And I think Donald Trump, to get back to your point, Donald Trump is not at all intending to go to war with Iran. You can go to Iraq and you can seek out all their nuclear facilities, if there are any, their computers and everything else, and you can destroy them, but you can't take down the software of their brains. There will be some software in their brains, they will be able to reconstitute the program. This is useless. You're just killing people for no purpose. He was right. He was right. If you want to build a bomb and you're prepared to commit money, and it is enormous, we even dissuaded Muammar Gaddafi to a certain extent because of the cost. The costs are just extraordinary. And, most countries don't have a closed system like North Korea does. The best description of North Korea is mafia. It's like a mafia state. It's a criminal state. You usually don't have that, even in a totalitarian state that, like Gaddafi ran, you don't have that. So it's a real decision when you decide that you're going to build a nuclear weapon and you don't have the GDP of a Russia or a China or the United States or India. Pakistan might be a little bit of an exception, except they were religious fanatics about creating the bomb. And they still honor A.Q. Khan as the father of the Muslim bomb, the Islamic bomb. All that to say that I understand Iran's religious objections to possessing a nuclear weapon. And I think it would be with great angst that many of them would create a nuclear weapon. But at the same time, it could be inevitable. And there's nothing the United States or Israel is going to do about it. So it's not a good direction to be going. I'm not trying to say that, but I am saying that I'm not so sure that deterrence wouldn't continue to work and work a whole lot better in the Persian Gulf were Iran to possess a bomb. I understand viscerally, I think I understand their religious objections to it. I've had the Quran quoted to me with regard to their objections. And I even said to a foreign minister who spoke English really well in New York City, I said to him, I think Muhammad would agree with you. Because I had just gone through the defense of a doctorate of one of my students who had written her whole paper, done her whole study on the Quran and on Muhammad's attitude towards women in particular, which was evolving even as Muhammad was living the last years of his life, evolving to give him women more power, more responsibility in Islamic states and towns and cities. And I think she was right. And we might not even be able to do what we did before because we are limited now because of what we did before. Our missiles are limited, our aircraft are limited, our pilots are limited. We've put them through the crunch so many times now that I'm not sure they could respond as conclusively as they did before. So again, I want to emphasize that with all of the array of enemies around Israel right now, the military power they represent, and I haven't even mentioned Turkey, then it's getting to be a very existential situation for Israel. And I think it might be to the point where we've got to make some really tough decisions. Do we cut them loose and let them fall? Or do we stay with them and get ourselves buried in the Levant in a way that, as Mearsheimer keeps saying, and I agree with John on this, takes our eye completely off the real ball, which is the other way in China. If we move down the road a little bit, the flankers are arriving right now. The new equipment training team is training the first Iranian squadron in the flanker in the Su-37, I think it is, really sophisticated aircraft with R-37 missiles and so forth. If that were to pick up speed and you had enough pilots, then Iran could react, I think, with a significant attack. Let me start at the beginning. They're 2 weeks away. They're at 60% right now, and it would take about 10 days to get to 90% and to build a bomb. Probably 4 to 5 bombs. I think they could do that without Israel picking up on it, but I think Israel has probably already concluded that that is the situation. I know we have. So at the same time, we have Zarif talking at Davos about how Iran would welcome a new negotiating technique coming from Trump where they would even talk about ballistic missiles. They would talk about no moratorium on anything. Trump would have a splendid deal, a new JCPOA. It would have all the things that it should have, that he said it should have when he walked out of the original one. That's going on at the same time that this atomic program is going on. And if it were to come to fruition, or even come close to fruition, I could see Israel doing that. And I don't think the United States would follow them in that action. And I don't think they would be successful. What they would invite is a counterstrike from Iran that might be devastating. So I don't think the Israelis have ever lived with peace. What you're saying is, have they lived with a time when they made lots of money, could go to the discos without being blown up, and felt relatively secure because they were treating their own 7+ million citizens who were non-Jewish as fourth-class citizens? Yeah. Even I, in 2002 and 2003, understood the Iranians to be doing with North Korean tutelage about working underground and working in soils, geological structures that were virtually impenetrable by modern munitions. At the same time, I have to say, I wouldn't put it past Netanyahu to say that there's a certain tunnel complex or whatever in Gaza and use one there. What it had was, in the case of the period you're talking about and labeling as peace, not your fault, was an open-air concentration camp with about 2.1, 2.2 million people in it, ongoing genocide, if you will, on the West Bank, on a slow burn, and in East Jerusalem as well. I do think he's going to weigh in when Bibi makes his move on Iran. And I think it's unquestionable he's going to make a move on Iran. And let me back up to the statements you made there. I inquired about Moabs that went to Israel earlier, several years ago. And when I inquired, I was told that we also gave them a couple of planes. So I don't know if that's now a true statement that they don't have the capability to deliver at least one or two themselves. This was on occasion where we thought we had pretty much pinpointed where the most dangerous underground facility was that pertained to going from 60% to 90% and then to a bomb. So he's eliminating Palestinians that give him a problem in any event. So he's not too much of a rush to resume. He may have some difficulty because there are domestic reasons and external reasons that might slow him down, but I think he will eventually get there. And in the meantime, he's doing pretty much the same thing in the West Bank. I think he's got real problems with what I would call the hostage movement, because people are beginning to understand, and revelations are coming out every day, that he's been the major impediment to getting their people back. And then second, I think he's in trouble because of a number of things that he's done, not least of which was the business with drafting those who are Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox, and the fact that the IDF is running out of people, very frankly speaking, and other issues like that that involve him personally in the political system. And his position is not as secure as the poll ratings might indicate. And the fact that he put sycophants in charge of the IDF, and now at least 60% or so of them are reporting genuinely on the position of the IDF, is not helping either. Some of them might walk out soon. I had a conversation 2 nights ago with a group of military colleagues where we put maps on the floor and we were looking at troop dispositions. We were looking at different possibilities and so forth. We were looking at the Turks, for example, in Syria. We were looking at the Israelis already deep into Syria now, well beyond the Syrian side of the Golan Heights even. We were looking at the armored forces of Jordan. We were looking at the forces of Egypt. We were looking at the forces of Iraq. And we came up with an idea of what all those forces might do if they acted even in reasonable concert and attacked Israel. I'm not even mentioning that Iran now has, as Israel has access across Syria to Iran, Iran also has access across Syria to Israel. Were all this to happen, Israel would disappear. Now, we all came down to the equation that Golda Meir came down to in 72, 73 or whatever. Would they then use a nuclear weapon? Our conclusion was they probably would. But that's in peril Israel could be ultimately. And then the question arose amongst us, what would the United States do? And we left that hanging in the air because we didn't know. what the United States would do.
Mm.
Cauldron like that, where Israel was essentially going down.
Mm.
When we resume this conflict, which I think there's at least a 60-40 chance of doing at the end of the 42-day period, particularly if Hamas is given the bulk of the hostages back, then the IDF is going to be recommitted to a struggle it's losing. There's no question about them losing it. Hamas has defeated the IDF in terms of its stated strategic objectives, number one of which was to eliminate them completely. They have anything but eliminated them completely. So they're going to start this thing all over again and continue to march on the only path that Netanyahu knows, and that is killing his enemies. I mean, Blinken was Netanyahu's Secretary of State in absentia. And when he was in Israel, he was the Secretary of State. But this administration is just as surrounded by these radical Zionists, money givers, as well as advice givers, as Biden and Blinken were. You might say that Biden and Blinken didn't need it as badly because they believed it themselves.
Yeah.
Trump needs to be reminded every minute, because I don't think he really cares about that aspect. I would say the kindest comment I heard, and giving Trump his due, I think, is that they thought he got confused about wanting to help people who were in extreme duress, notwithstanding the fact that he and the man next to him in that Oval Office meeting, anyway, Netanyahu, were responsible for that duress. But that's beside the point with Trump. That was a genuine show of concern about the people. That's the kindest remark I've heard. You can look like you have the other. You can look like you have passionate hatred or whatever, but you don't really have it. What you're worried about is you're losing money or you're gaining money, or you're gaining traction politically or you're losing traction politically. That, I think those are the only calculations that really matter to Trump. I know it sounds weird, but I've met people like that before in my life. They're different kinds of brains. I think there is a reason if Trump has animosity toward any individual. I think we were looking at that individual in that scene in the Oval Office. I don't think he likes Bibi Netanyahu at all. I really think, I like John Mearsheimer, I like Steve Walt. Most of the things they say I agree with. I really think in some ways they did a disservice in trying to pin everything on the Israel lobby. I don't think the Israel lobby has any blame for what happens in the United States, except the total takeover of the sycophant Congress and some other aspects of that. I think Israel is our tool to keep the Levant and hegemony therein. That's what I think is going on. I don't think that their tail wags the dog. I think we are the dog. I'm sad to say this. The recently confirmed new DNI is of this same nature, Tulsi Gabbard, who were telling him differently. They're giving him a different history. They're giving him a different picture of what's happening in the region, a different picture of Israel. If you've gone on a tour in Israel and gone on that bus with Israelis briefing you, and you know the real situation and the real history, you want to open the bus window and puke. It's disgusting what they do. But most people don't know anything. And so they're being impregnated with that message very carefully and very successfully by the Israeli tour guides and the Israeli people who accompany these showpiece trips. They even take you to the Golan, for example, below it, and tell you to look up there and imagine tanks or artillery up there, and how insignificant Israel is below, and how utterly dangerous it would be for Israel if an enemy would occupy those heights. Well, the question you want to ask is, why would an enemy want to occupy those heights? Because you're here, and because you've been here for 75 years, and you stole the land. They don't know that history. I'm flying drones over Syria, picking out new spots for my people to live. Wonderful, wonderful, Bibi. I should have said the most destabilizing factor in the Levant is our poodle named Israel. But ultimately, it's the empire. Ultimately, the empire is behind the whole thing. I think Netanyahu would like to finish off Hezbollah if he can. And I also think these 5 locations, if you look at them, I think at least 3 of them, possibly all 5, are designed to allow Netanyahu to tell the Israelis who still have not come back to their homes in that northern section to come back. In other words, we're here, we're going to stay here, we're never leaving, and we'll give you the protection that you desire so you can come home. Because it's making him look bad, making him look really bad. Particularly the fact that I'm told a lot of those people have left Israel now, totally left, and aren't planning on ever coming back. So he wants to staunch that. I don't understand why we haven't done that. If we have them on our payroll still, is it for nefarious purposes that we do, and therefore we don't care about their being able to rule or govern in Syria? Or is it because we don't want them to rule or govern in Syria? This is really some nasty ground to go over. But he has not honored, as I've said before, he has not honored a day of the ceasefire with Lebanon or with Gaza. He's killed people every single day. Now, to be honest, Hezbollah and, well, at least according to Israeli intelligence, IDF intelligence, Hezbollah has violated it several times too. And Hamas has violated it several times too. But I can't find any concrete evidence of that. And I'm really reluctant to take the IDF or Mossad's word for it because I know they lie through their teeth all the time. But ceasefires don't mean anything to Netanyahu. We have a terrible record, much of which has recently been exposed to me, of working with Daesh, Al Qaeda, and other terrorist groups, particularly in the Levant, and using them for our own purposes, almost the way we use Israel for our own purposes. The fact that they are not states is inconsequential. They still are being used for our purposes. And then we cut them loose and rebrand them as terrorists and go after them, whatever. It's really nefarious what we're doing. But I'm wondering, I can't calculate properly what we're doing in Syria and why we're doing it. Maybe it's because of the change in administrations. I don't know. Maybe Trump ordered someone to shut down the CIA and then he would review everything they were doing. That'd be a first. I hope he did do that. I doubt the CIA shut everything down because they know they can hide some of the things they're doing. And they think they can get by with it until the next president comes in. I don't know. I really don't. But Syria right now, in many respects, is mystifying. I don't know what we're aiming at in Syria. And I think Donald Trump, to get back to your point, Donald Trump is not at all intending to go to war with Iran. You can go to Iraq and you can seek out all their nuclear facilities, if there are any, their computers and everything else, and you can destroy them, but you can't take down the software of their brains. There will be some software in their brains, they'll be able to reconstitute the program. This is useless. You're just killing people for no purpose. He was right. He was right. If you want to build a bomb and you're prepared to commit money, and it is enormous, we even dissuaded Muammar Gaddafi to a certain extent because of the cost. The costs are just extraordinary. And, most countries don't have a closed system like North Korea does. The best description of North Korea is mafia. It's like a mafia state. It's a criminal state. You usually don't have that, even in a totalitarian state that, like Gaddafi ran, you don't have that. So it's a real decision when you decide that you're going to build a nuclear weapon and you don't have the GDP of a Russia or a China or the United States or India. Pakistan might be a little bit of an exception, except they were religious fanatics about creating the bomb. And they still honor A.Q. Khan as the father of the Muslim bomb, the Islamic bomb. All that to say that I understand Iran's religious objections to possessing a nuclear weapon. And I think it would be with great angst that many of them would create a nuclear weapon. But at the same time, it could be inevitable. And there's nothing the United States or Israel is going to do about it. So it's not a good direction to be going. I'm not trying to say that, but I am saying that I'm not so sure that deterrence wouldn't continue to work and work a whole lot better in the Persian Gulf were Iran to possess a bomb. I understand viscerally, I think I understand their religious objections to it. I've had the Quran quoted to me with regard to their objections. And I even said to a foreign minister who spoke English really well in New York City, I said to him, I think Mohammed would agree with you, because I had just gone through the defense of a doctorate of one of my students who had written her whole paper, done her whole study on the Quran and on Muhammad's attitude towards women in particular, which was evolving even as Muhammad was living the last years of his life, evolving to give him women more power, more responsibility in Islamic states and towns and cities. And I think she was right. A nuclear weapon owning state called Israel would be exempt by that. Listen to this. Single greatest force for instability in the Middle East is the United States of America, not Iran. Who is causing the instability in the Levant? Who is really causing it? The United States of America. Right now, most vociferously and obviously and most disdainful to the world through Israel. But we use Israel. Israel doesn't use us. We use Israel to destabilize that region because, Nima, we do not like Arabs. Rubio saying that, Rubio standing up there and saying that and looking like he looks and speaking the way he speaks is a travesty, as bad as Blinken's being Netanyahu's lawyer. But if you put them in the position where the people in Tehran, and they're going to move their capital down on the southern coast, did you see that? Smart move. But if you put those people in a room and you gave them their head, they would go ahead and build that ball. And then Marco Rubio's got something else to say. Now we have two destabilizing powers, each equipped with a bomb. What are we going to do now? Because I think they would do it before we could do anything about it, before even Israel could do anything about it. I think they've learned enough to where they can be that secretive now. But let's parse it from Rubio's point of view. I don't even know if Rubio knows that, because Trump is famous for keeping things close to his chest or close to his Steve Bannon-like or Elon Musk-like advisors and not telling his actual cabinet officers. But let's just examine it for a moment. They are 7 days away from a nuclear weapon. They're at 60+% on enrichment. And the time between 60% and 90% and a bomb is only about a week. So if they were to make a decision and to go, they'd have probably 4 to 5 bombs within 14, 15 days. Believe me, I have been here with the AQCON network, with Libya, with South Africa, with Argentina, with other countries that were playing with that network, and some who were intimately in that network, like Iran, like North Korea, and who actually wound up either getting close, like Iran, or got bombs, like North Korea. And by the way, when Ye-gun and Kang Sak-ju in Pyongyang in 2002 told our Assistant Secretary of State, with some laughter, he was promising them a big economic package if they would kill their nuclear program, that they already had bombs. You could have cut him, my mission just failed. We didn't know. We did not know they had bombs. So I'm saying that Iran, if it makes the decision, and I have talked with a number of Iranians, foreign minister, a president named Ahmadinejad in New York, and others in New York when they were here for the General Assembly. I've talked to them. I believe them when they tell me that they would operationalize their fatwa at the United Nations if we wanted them to, and sign it in blood that Islam abhors a nuclear weapon.